Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is not only a memoir of his years in Nazi concentration camps, but also a profound psychological exploration of what it means to live, to suffer, and to find meaning in even the harshest conditions. Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist, was deported to Auschwitz in 1942, stripped of his family, his possessions, and his professional identity. In the book, he takes readers through the daily horrors of camp life, not in the spirit of mere historical record, but in order to show how the human spirit can endure suffering when it is anchored to meaning. His dual role as both prisoner and psychiatrist allows him to interpret experiences in ways that illuminate not only survival, but also the very essence of human existence. The narrative begins with his arrival at Auschwitz, when prisoners were immediately separated. Those deemed fit for labor sent one way, those considered unfit sent another, usually directly to the gas chambers. In a single moment, the fate of thousands was decided without explanation. Frankl describes the chilling scene of prisoners clutching their last belongings, only to be told to discard everything: wedding rings, photographs, even shoes, under the illusion they would get them back. This stripping of possessions symbolized the stripping of identity. People were reduced to numbers tattooed on their arms, their individuality erased. Yet Frankl notes that within this dehumanizing process, an inner freedom remained, the freedom to choose one's attitude, to decide whether to surrender to despair or to cling to a sense of purpose. In the early days of imprisonment, most prisoners experienced a form of shock. Frankl remembers the grotesque blend of disbelief and numbness. Even as he watched columns of smoke rise from the crematoria, there was a surreal detachment, as if one's mind refused to grasp the enormity of the horror. Inmates learned quickly not to ask too many questions, not to expect fairness, and not to count on survival. Death was everywhere. Men collapsed from exhaustion, froze in the snow, or were shot for minor infractions. Yet amid the constant threat of death, life inside the camp developed its own rhythms. A crust of bread became a treasure, a sip of watery soup a reprieve, a moment of rest a luxury. Survival depended not only on physical strength, but on psychological resilience. Frankl observed that those who survived were not always the strongest or the healthiest, but often those who had a reason to live. He tells of prisoners who found motivation in the hope of reuniting with loved ones, in unfinished work, or in faith that suffering had meaning. Conversely, he saw how men who abandoned hope quickly withered. A man who gave up often lay down in the straw, refused to eat, smoked his last cigarette, and within days was dead. Despair was lethal. Frankl emphasizes that humans cannot live without a sense of why. They can endure almost anyhow if they believe there is a purpose. One of the most striking features of camp life was the way suffering revealed human character. Some prisoners behaved brutally, stealing bread from weaker men, collaborating with guards, or exploiting others. Yet others displayed unexpected nobility, sharing their last morsel or offering comfort. Frankl recounts moments when a kind word, a joke, or a gesture of compassion made the difference between despair and endurance. These small acts demonstrated that even when stripped of everything, a person still retains the freedom to choose kindness over cruelty. Frankl himself survived partly by clinging to thoughts of his wife. In moments of torment, when forced to march through the snow in thin rags, beaten by guards, he focused his mind on her image. He realized that love could transcend physical separation. Her presence in his thoughts was as real to him as if she stood beside him. This inner dialogue, this communion through memory, gave him strength. He reflects that love is the highest goal to which humans can aspire, a truth revealed most starkly in suffering. Another sustaining force was his professional identity as a psychiatrist. Frankl had been working on a manuscript before his arrest, a book on logotherapy. His theory that the search for meaning is the central human motivation. The Nazis confiscated the manuscript, but the thought of rewriting it kept him alive. He vowed that if he survived, he would reconstruct his ideas and share them with the world. The dream of this unfinished task became a beacon of purpose. In this way, Frankl himself lived the principles he later articulated, that meaning can be found in work, in love, and in suffering itself. Life in the camps was a constant negotiation between despair and survival. The prisoners were subject to provisional existence, an existence where the future was utterly uncertain. They never knew whether they would be alive tomorrow or even in the next hour. Frankl explains how this undermined their psychological stability. People accustomed to thinking in terms of future goals, education, careers, family, suddenly had no timeline, no assurance of continuity. Time seemed suspended. Some gave in to apathy, a deadening of emotions that protected them from constant pain but also eroded their humanity. Frankl recalls how, at first, men reacted to the sight of corpses with horror. Later, they walked past the dead with indifference. Even the beatings from guards lost their sting because they were so commonplace. To feel too much was dangerous. Numbness was a shield. Yet Frankl insists that apathy was not the only option. He recalls how some prisoners cultivated a sense of inner richness, retreating into art, memory, or humor. Humor, though scarce, became a survival tool. Frankl and a friend would make jokes about their predicament, inventing absurd scenarios. Laughter, even fleeting, created a sense of distance from suffering, a reminder that they were still human. Likewise, nature offered moments of transcendence. Frankl describes looking at the sunset through barbed wire, or marveling at a bird perched nearby, and feeling uplifted. Even in a place built on death, beauty could penetrate and awaken a sense of meaning. Punishment and cruelty in the camp were often arbitrary. Prisoners could be beaten or killed for failing to march in step, for carrying too heavy a load, or simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The system was designed to break spirits. Yet Frankl noticed that men who cultivated an inner attitude of resistance could retain a sense of dignity. He remembers one prisoner who, even while suffering, carried himself with composure, showing that his spirit was not broken. This taught Frankl that the last of the human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any circumstance. External conditions may limit what we can do, but we can still decide how to respond. Frankl draws a contrast between two types of prisoners: those who lived only for themselves, grabbing food, betraying others, and those who lived for something beyond themselves, whether love, work, or faith. The latter often had a greater chance of survival. He gives the example of a man who believed he must live to finish his scientific work, another who dreamed of seeing his children again, and himself clinging to the thought of reconstructing his manuscript. Purpose acted like a shield against despair. Without it, a prisoner was like a boat without a rudder, adrift and doomed. When liberation finally came, it was both joyful and bewildering. Prisoners who survived had to face the reality that the world outside had moved on without them, that loved ones might be dead, and that freedom itself could feel overwhelming. Many experienced what Frankl calls depersonalization, a sense that they no longer belonged in ordinary life. Some fell into bitterness, unable to reconcile the suffering they endured with the seeming indifference of the world. Frankl himself struggled with the loss of his family, including his wife. Yet he also saw liberation as the fulfillment of the responsibility he had carried all along: to live, to testify, and to teach the lessons of survival through meaning. In the second half of the book, Frankl elaborates on logotherapy, the approach to psychotherapy that grew from his camp experiences. Unlike Freud, who emphasized the pursuit of pleasure, or Adler, who emphasized the pursuit of power, Frankl argued that the primary drive in human beings is the search for meaning. People can endure hardship if they believe their lives have purpose. Conversely, even comfort and success can feel empty if they lack meaning. Logotherapy is future-oriented, helping people discover what tasks, relationships, or responsibilities call them forward. Frankl explains that meaning can be found in three main ways: through work, through love, and through the attitude one takes toward unavoidable suffering. Work involves creating something, accomplishing a task, or contributing to society. Love involves deep connection, seeing another person's potential, and cherishing their essence. Suffering, though painful, can be meaningful if endured with courage and dignity. Frankl emphasizes that suffering is not necessary for meaning, but when suffering is unavoidable, it can become an opportunity for growth. For instance, a terminally ill patient may find meaning in how they face their illness, inspiring others by their example. He also discusses the existential vacuum, the sense of emptiness and meaninglessness that plagues modern society. People often fill this void with pleasure, wealth, or power, but these substitutes do not satisfy the deeper need for purpose. This is why some fall into depression, addiction, or aggression. Logotherapy seeks to help people uncover unique meanings in their lives, for no one else can answer for them what they alone are called to do. Each person has a specific mission, a responsibility that cannot be transferred. Meaning is not invented but discovered, in the reality of the world and in the encounters of one's life. Frankl's message is ultimately one of hope. Even in Auschwitz, he found that life retained potential meaning, that human dignity could be preserved, and that suffering could be transformed into inner triumph. He urges readers not to ask, "What do I expect from life?" but rather, "What does life expect of me?" This reversal shifts focus from entitlement to responsibility. Life poses questions, and each person must answer with action, courage, and authenticity. By finding meaning, people can endure suffering, overcome despair, and live with a sense of fulfillment. Frankl illustrates this with examples from his psychiatric practice after the war. He recalls treating a man who had lost his wife and felt life was meaningless. Frankl asked him to imagine if the roles were reversed, if the man had died first and left his wife to suffer. The man realized that his survival spared his wife that pain. Suddenly his suffering had meaning. He bore it so she did not have to. In another case, a woman dying of cancer found solace in the thought that her courage gave her children an example of strength. These stories show how logotherapy helps people reframe suffering as meaningful. The book closes with a profound reminder: life is never without meaning, not even in suffering and death. The responsibility to find meaning belongs to each person. Frankl lived this truth by surviving the camps, reconstructing his manuscript, teaching logotherapy, and writing this book. Man's search for meaning is thus both a testimony of survival and a guide for living. It shows that while we cannot always control our circumstances, we can always choose how to respond. That choice, to find meaning, to live with dignity, and to bear suffering with courage, is the ultimate expression of human freedom. The lessons Frankl imparts resonate far beyond the concentration camps. They speak to anyone facing hardship, loss, or the emptiness of modern life. His message is not abstract philosophy but lived reality, that even when stripped of everything, even when surrounded by death, a person can still say yes to life. By loving, by creating, by enduring, we fulfill the unique task life sets before each of us. This is the meaning of existence, not pleasure, not power, but purpose. And in this lies the secret of resilience, hope, and true freedom. And that's it. Viktor E. Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.